Hey guys, welcome to my channel. I hope you're all doing very well. So I just saw Spider-Man Far From Home. Let's talk about it. Spider-Man Far From Home is directed by John Watts, and going into this film I was a tad apprehensive because whilst I've been interested in the promotional material, I did feel like it was a bit too soon coming off of Endgame and the huge events that we had there. I did feel like we needed a bit more time to just kind of settle and let Endgame and all of its events sink in before diving into a new film. But I have to say that this film, I mean, I'm pretty much last to the party, so this is no surprise to anyone at this point, but this film is absolutely amazing. I had a great time with Spider-Man Far From Home, far better than I ever would have expected going in. This is going to be a spoiler review, of course, because everyone who wanted to see Spider-Man Far From Home has already seen it. So this is just going to be a discussion of the film. And please be sure to subscribe if you'd like to catch any new reviews. Usually they're not quite as late as 2 weeks after the film has been released. So without further ado, let's get into this review. First off, let's start off with the good. And like I said, there's a lot of good to be said about this film. And the first thing that's front and center of all of that is Tom Holland as Spider-Man. It comes as a surprise to absolutely no one at this point. This is his fourth performance in the role, and I have to say that he just keeps getting better and better and better. He is so skilled at depicting the unique characteristics that Peter Parker specifically has in the superhero genre that we're facing today. Peter Parker is just so young. He's a teenager, and whilst he's very intelligent and also incredibly brave, which this film definitely makes note of and Tom Holland is able to depict very, very well, he's at the same time quite naive and he lacks foresight. You know, he's dealing with very daunting adult issues as a very young person, and at this point in time in the MCU, the worst has already happened. He has already died and he's come back now, and he's facing the realities and the consequences of that. And it's because of his youth and it's because of his naivete that he makes mistakes in this film. He trusts Beck, aka Mysterio, even when he shouldn't, because, well, actually for two reasons. Firstly, because their relationship actually grows and develops very convincingly in the film, and whilst the film doesn't dedicate a lot of time to them being together on screen, you definitely get the sense that Mysterio is able to really get into Peter's heart and get into his mind even, and really understand where he's coming from. And as a result, and Jake Gyllenhaal definitely sells this superbly, but we'll talk about him later on, but as a result, you're definitely convinced of the relationship and the friendship, the camaraderie that is developing between Peter and Beck, and that just makes it all the more compelling when he does finally tell Beck, listen, I'm going to give you Tony Stark's legacy because I feel like I can trust you with it. And that is ultimately a mistake, but it's a convincing one. It's one that could be easily made, especially considering Peter's mentality. Peter's judgment at this point is largely clouded by the events that happened in Avengers Infinity War and Avengers Endgame. He's dealing with a lot of stress and even maybe PTSD concerning everything that happened during those films, during those events. And so right now he is so desperate to just let all of that go, which is such a huge contrast in comparison to the Peter Parker that we met in Homecoming, who was desperate to be a part of the superhero world. At this point in time, he has had enough. He just wants to be free of it all because it's hanging so heavily on his shoulders. And this isn't a new theme in the MCU. We've seen this affect even Tony Stark, and we saw it affect Steve Rogers at the end there. And so of course a teenager like Peter Parker would definitely feel the effects of superheroing for so long on his psyche, on his mind. And so that just made him more vulnerable to Mysterio's attack on him, his psychological attack on him. And as a result, he ended up trusting someone that he really, really shouldn't have, with something as huge as Tony Stark's legacy and Tony Stark's trust and responsibility that he had placed on Peter. A huge running theme in this film is Peter's feelings and his thoughts and his worries concerning carrying this huge burden that is Tony Stark's legacy. Tony entrusted Peter with this very powerful technology, showing him that he believed that he could carry on Tony's work. You could definitely sense just how heavy that weight was for Peter to carry, and that's part of the reason why he just wanted to be free for the summer. And it makes it all the more rewarding when you do finally see him come to terms with his role and the role that Tony Stark wanted him to fulfill. And he's on that private plane with Happy, and he is using his intelligence as well well as making use of Tony Stark's technology in order to create a brand new suit, a brand new piece that is uniquely his. That was the first time in the film where Peter didn't just focus on his shortcomings and what made him very different from Tony Stark in the negative way. And it felt like he had finally come home and he was able to really come into his own and accept what he had to offer was more than good enough to fulfill Tony Stark's legacy. So that scene was absolutely brilliant. I love the way that Happy was kind of looking on, kind of like a proud father in that moment. I thought that was excellent. Jon Favreau did an amazing job just kind of conveying all of these emotions, these complex emotions, without really saying much at all. I love the music playing over top. That scene was just absolutely perfect, apart from the fact that they did steal Miles Morales' suit. I felt a bit iffy about that, but otherwise that was just a beautiful scene. Secondly, speaking of Mysterio, I thought that Jake Gyllenhaal did a phenomenal job as this character. I loved every single second that he was on screen. He was spectacular. And the reason why is because he was actually so likable. He's kind of like Loki in the sense of his plan is insane. It's insanity, and you can definitely see that insanity at work later on in the film. But he always has that charm about him. He's very charming. He's very friendly towards Peter. At the beginning, he's just trying to connect with Peter and see what makes him tick. He's able to really analyze Peter and also portraying this character who's so welcoming, but at the same time has his own dark past. It was just such a good collection of story beats and character arcs that Mysterio collected all together and wrapped up in a neat bow and offered it to Peter, and Peter ate it up just like the rest of us. And I again already knew that he was going to be the bad guy. I had my doubts in the middle of the film there because I was like, he is so nice, he can't be evil. Of course he was evil. And that scene where they're in the bar and everything just unravels after Peter has left and has given Beck everything that he wanted in the AI, I felt like that was just excellent. That was the moment where I was like, okay, I was right. He is going to be the bad guy. But boy, do I love how they got there. And I love especially the fact that it wasn't like in the third act, all of a sudden, Beck hated Peter. It very much felt like the friendship that had developed between Mysterio and Peter was reciprocated. It's just that Mysterio had his evil plan that he had to carry out, and he wasn't about to let anything get in the middle of that. But I liked the fact that he didn't all of a sudden just despise Peter and want him dead automatically. Like, he actually mourned Peter and actually mourned the fact that he would have to fight him, and he did things somewhat reluctantly. Now, do I think there was a level of him that was just, it was a bit of showmanship? Maybe that he's so twisted that he kind of felt bad they had to get rid of Peter, but not really. But again, that just adds to the complexity of the character and how convincing he is as a charming but also twisted and maniacal character. Fabulous. Another aspect of the character that I very much enjoyed was his illusions. His illusions brought something so new and exciting to the Spider-Man franchise, because in my opinion, street level crime works. I love Daredevil, the Netflix series, but in the superhero landscape that we're experiencing today, I feel like there needs to be something more. There needs to be something punchier. Just because of what we've got on offer to us nowadays, there needs to be something more than just a burglary or a cat stuck in a tree. And I feel like Mysterio's illusions, whether they were the elementals and also those brilliant illusions at the end there where he was trying to confuse and disorientate Peter, were just expertly done. Just absolutely phenomenal. I think they definitely yada the technology, but overall it just worked so well for me. I definitely got those Doctor Strange vibes, but they went in even further than Doctor Strange in my opinion, and I absolutely loved that. I love that there wasn't just one scene, he was using it several times. It just added such a special element to this Earth-based story, and I feel like a lot of the Earth-based Marvel films tend to have a sameness when it comes to the visual flair, but this definitely had something elevated in its visuals. And Mysterio definitely brought everything. He brought everything to the table and I ate it all up. Next up, I really enjoyed the presence of Nick Fury in this film, even though it didn't technically end up being Nick Fury. But I really liked him here. I preferred him to when he was in Captain Marvel, where he was a bit out of character to me. And at the end, when it is revealed that he is a Skrull, I very much enjoyed that. Speaking of characters who have really just had a huge impression on me in the MCU, I love Ben Mendelsohn's character in Captain Marvel. He was one of my favorite parts of that whole film. And I was really excited to see him here again. Just hearing that Australian accent put a smile on my face. I can't wait to see what they do with those Skrull characters going forward, but I'm just really happy that they're starting to incorporate them into the other films. And then of course you have the rest of the supporting cast in the classmates of Peter Parker, and they're off to their European journey. First of all, I absolutely adored, I loved and I laughed at Martin Starr's teacher character. That teacher is so hilarious. I love the fact that he just had such quiet but hilarious moments, and Martin Starr's delivery was just on point. He is so funny in Silicon Valley, and he was even funnier here. Loved him. I also really liked the dynamics between the different classmates. I find it interesting that you have some classmates that are 5 years older and they're still in the same class. Like, that doesn't seem legal to me, especially considering that one of them is romantically interested in MJ. Like, that doesn't seem, because he's 21, so it doesn't seem right to me. But anyways, I liked Ned. I don't love Ned, but I think he's a really cool companion to Peter. I liked him better when MJ knew the truth and they were just kind of interacting and he was showing her the ropes of being in Peter's entourage, which I appreciated. And I also very much enjoyed his little holiday romance that he had with that blonde girl who's also in Black Mirror season 6. And one of the funniest moments in this film actually came at the beginning, where they had the opening in memoriam to Whitney Houston's song, and then they had that stock photo of the candle that just broke me. That I was in tears after that. That is so funny. And this film is just absolutely hilarious in general. I just think there are some really funny moments here. And of course, we cannot forget to mention that special cameo from J.K. Simmons as J. Jonah Jameson. They already knew. They knew that no one could ever replace him, so they were like, you know what, we're just gonna say that it's in the same universe. JJJ, take the wheel. And I really appreciated that. It was hilarious, absolutely hilarious. And just in general, I think the writing is very tight. Just aside from the comedic elements to this film, like I said, I really enjoyed the exploration of the psychological consequences that Peter Parker faced after Tony Stark's death, after losing someone that he considered to be a mentor and almost a father figure. And the fact that he was so susceptible to being fooled by Mysterio is because he wanted a replacement for that so desperately. I also very much enjoyed Mysterio's origin story. I love the fact that they didn't try to make him a separate character and give him a family and kids and all that. Like, he was always in the background. And that scene where they're kind of unraveling the different roles that Mysterio and his entourage had to play within the MCU is so funny, because for a second there you think, oh, maybe if I go back and watch Civil War, will I see a small Jake Gyllenhaal in the shadow of Tony Stark? Of course you will not, unless they edit it in, which would be absolutely hilarious. But I just find it so funny how they decided to retcon the situation and put him in there. And of course he would have gone insane seeing Tony Stark just trivialize his life's work. And he was obviously always unhinged to begin with. So I absolutely love that. I love the fact that we've got like Karen and Tim from accounting and, you know, Michael from tailoring. Like, it was just brilliant. It was brilliantly done. I do feel like we could see a return of those characters, because we never actually saw the consequences that they faced as a result of Mysterio's actions. It was just a very clever way of enveloping the average Joe into this story, much like how Homecoming kind of explored Michael Keaton and his crew, and how they just wanted to make a living out of cleaning up the mess that the Avengers made after the Battle of New York. But Tony Stark even took that away from them, and so that resentment grew. I love the fact you have a similar situation here where, again, there's this like bubbling and boiling resentment of Tony Stark that's kind of tainting his legacy, which Peter Parker is trying to embody and trying to respect. So it's a very well written story, and I think it definitely fits well when you consider the MCU at large. And finally, I want to give a special shout out to all of the amazing cities that were represented in this film, and by no means am I biased towards the city of London, but I was very excited to see it be represented here, as it should be, and I'm sure Tom Holland was also just as excited, being a Brit himself. I definitely feel like this film handled its international presence far greater than the other Sony released film that came out a few weeks ago by the name of Men in Black International. That film failed in truly depicting the beauty and just the uniqueness of all of its locations, whereas here you definitely get this film milking the locations that it's in. When it was in the Netherlands, it was absolutely hilarious when Peter ended up dropping in the middle of that flower field. When he goes to London and they end up in the Tower of London, which is such an underrated tourist attraction, and I love that they ended up using the crown jewels and the safe surrounding it to their benefit. That was so clever, although those crown jewels in the background were so obviously fake that it did make me cringe a little bit. Like, you couldn't look in the background because you could see how those jewels came from like Party City or something. They were not real, but I still appreciated the sentiment nonetheless. Like I said, this is the second Sony film to be released this summer that focused on an international presence, and I definitely think that Spider-Man did a superior job than Men in Black, so props to it there. This film also did an excellent job of allowing us to really feel what it's like to be in a class that's going across the world and going traveling. You have that worried teacher, you have that teacher who's worried a little less, it should be worried a bit more. You have classmates kind of acting up, you have holiday romances. Like, I absolutely love that. I've been on many school trips like that, and I just think it was so relatable and so fun to see that on screen. And again, Martin Starr was so good at depicting that kind of teacher. And when it comes to the things that I didn't like quite as much, I only have a couple of real jarring criticisms that I have of this film. And firstly, it is the depiction of MJ. I feel like she was very much sidelined in this film. She became less of a character in her own right and more of just the object of Peter's affections. And whilst those affections are so adorable, and I love the fact that he has this multi-step plan to get her to like him during the holiday, I did feel like a lot of what we saw from her and a lot of what we experienced from her was through Peter's eyes. We didn't really get a chance to get into her own mind and figure out what kind of character she is. And considering that she is part of the trio that is closest to Peter, considering Aunt May and Ned, and then of course MJ, out of the three, I definitely have less of an insight into what kind of character she is because we spend so much time looking at her through Peter's eyes. And secondly, we have of course the consequences of the blip being explored in this film, like I said. Now, the blip is kind of like the follow-up to the snap. So the snap was when everyone disappeared, and the blip is when everyone came back again, according to Kevin Feige. And whilst I do feel like this film kind of looks at that and looks at what happened after that in a very interesting way, I would like to see, and it's not really a criticism of the film per se, but I would like to see a bit more of a dramatic and more pensive exploration of the consequences of Thanos' actions, because we have so many things to deal with right now. We have a population that's actually larger than what it was before Thanos came along and snapped everyone out of existence. We have so many problems in society that you could explore, whether it's financially, you know, economically, to do with resources, to do with people's lives and psychologically. Like, there's so many things that you can really delve into as a consequence of the events of Infinity War and Endgame. And I feel like this film kind of brushes them off for laughs, which again, very funny film, but I would like to see a project perhaps in maybe Disney Plus or maybe Falcon and Winter Soldier TV show could explore this. The idea that there are huge consequences of Thanos' actions despite the fact that the Avengers won at the end, and what those consequences are. Like, I would be interested in seeing that come to pass in some kind of project. It wasn't in this one, and I felt like not a lot was explored in a very serious level in this film, but I would like to see that at some point. So overall, clearly I have a very positive view of this film, apart from the fact that, and I actually forgot to mention this, I was in Venice The day before this film started shooting in Venice, I was on Rialto Bridge literally 24 hours before Tom Holland was, and I was so frustrated that I ended up missing that shoot. So I did kind of go into this film with a few salty feelings, but despite all of that, I had such a good time that I can no longer harbor any ill feelings towards this film, and as a result, I am going to give this one an 8.5 out of 10. So that's it from me. Now that I've told you guys what my thoughts were on Spider-Man Far From Home, finally, it's time for you guys to let me know what you thought down in the comments below. Please be sure to subscribe to catch any new videos coming up, including, of course, a review for the live action Lion King, which I'm dreading. Thank you guys so much for watching. I really appreciate it, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.